Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. So today's topic is going to be Gimme 10 male-female duo albums. So I've got 10. I was really annoyed. There were 2 albums I was convinced I had in my collection and I don't have them anymore. So I won't mention them in case somebody else shows them. But yeah, there were 2 that I couldn't find. So I had to top up my little pile here with 2 fairly obvious choices. So we'll start with the 2 big obvious ones and then we'll go through some maybe less obvious ones. So we'll start off with this Ram by Paul and Linda McCartney. Often forgotten that this was credited to them both. You know, it's seen as being a Paul McCartney album, and it is really, let's face it. You know, I think there was some controversy back in the early 70s that McCartney was doing some kind of little publishing fiddle by including Linda's name, but you know, her harmonies are all over this record, and I think Linda's contribution was fairly huge, really, in the sense of you know, being somebody who was there to support Paul McCartney through the awful process of dissolution following the Beatles split, and just kind of, you know, helping him regain his confidence. So you know, I think that's valid, really, to call that a Paul and Linda album, even though it's often not thought of as being one. And by extension we'll have Double Fantasy by John and Yoko, which, strictly speaking, it's not, I guess, you know, separate tracks, one by John, one by Yoko, one by John, one by Yoko. In fact, interestingly, I don't think I've ever discovered or read or, you know, found out whether they helped each other on each other's songs, or whether they were just completely separate. Can anybody help me with that? I don't know. Anyway, clearly the final album that was released in John's lifetime, it's got some good stuff on it. A couple of real classics, actually. You know, it's got Watching the Wheels, which is a great John Lennon song, and Beautiful Boy, and Just Like Starting Over. Bit of a weepy album, that. Right, let's go on to the less obvious stuff. So this one is an interesting record. This is Shelly Orphan, who were a British duo signed to Rough Trade Records back in the 80s, and they played this really amazing kind of ethereal form of what you might call chamber pop. It had flutes in it and clarinets, and really interesting group, actually. I think they made 2 or 3 records. I need to look at my notes. I can't remember the name of the people who were in the band. Caroline Crawley, who was a songwriter, she died a few years ago. And Gimme Tail. They were from Bournemouth, and they were discovered by Jeff Travis, and they had a bit of success in the 80s, like I said. This is their first album, Hellboreen, which apparently is the name of a rare orchid, and it's a really beautiful record. It's one that you can kind of drift off to. Like I said, it's very delicate, almost flower-like, you know, appropriately given the title, but just really ethereal, beautiful woodwinds and clarinets. It's a vocal album, you know, so it's song-based, but yeah, I've got the next album after this, which I think is called Century Flower, maybe? I don't know, I can't remember. I need to do a video on them at some point. So anyway, Shelly Orphan. Right, next, complete contrast. Let's go back into the mists of time. This was 1973, I think, and we got a bit of I Cantina. This is their album Nutbush City Limits. I love that cover, which contains the classic hit Nutbush City Limits. I was reading about this. It's really funny. There was a review from a magazine, I think it was Rolling Stone magazine or something, and the review of it said that this was simply the best I Cantina album that had been made up until that point, which I thought was quite a nice preemptive review. I Cantina, that is a blistering album. It really is, full on. Right, this is probably the most obscure one of the bunch. This is a soul album by the duo Inez and Charles Fox, and there's a beautiful cover. There's a photograph of them on the back there. Now, this pair, they were like a precursor to the White Stripes. Everybody assumed that they were a husband and wife team, whereas in fact they were brother and sister. And they were signed to Sue Records back in the 60s. Inez Fox was the singer, and Charlie Fox played guitar and did some backing vocals, and their big hit was Mockingbird, which was a kind of rewrite of the old children's song, Hush Little Baby, Don't You Cry. So it has that tune, but it's done as a kind of R&B song. Great stuff. This is on United Artists. And yeah, that song was covered by everybody. I did make a list of the people who covered it so I could share that with you. Just give us 1 second. I'll read that out to you. So it was covered by Aretha Franklin, James Taylor, Carly Simon, Dusty Springfield, Etta James and Taj Mahal, amongst other people. So it was clearly a big song. I think it sold 1 million copies. So presumably they didn't have to go back to their day jobs. So yeah, Inez and Charlie Fox. Actually I said Charles Fox, didn't I? Charlie Fox and Mockingbird. Right, this next one, this was some Vclt that I got a couple of years ago from John Bellamy here on the VC, and this record actually is better than I remembered. I played it again last night, and I'd say roughly 2/3 of it are actually really good. There's a third which is a bit slushy. This album features, let me just show you the picture. This album features one song by Ashford and Simpson. I think it was the only song on the record. It's on Tamla Motown and it's called Just Say, Just Say. Fantastic song. And I think I'm right in saying that that was the last song that they wrote for the label, Ashford and Simpson. Other than that, there's a couple of other good tracks on here. I'm Falling in Love with You, which is a very gaudy tune. Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of slush on here, but there's definitely more good tracks than I remember. It's got all the beautiful Motown arrangements and musicianship and so on. So, but apparently, Diana and Marvin, they didn't really hit it off in the studio. There was a couple of issues. When the first day that Diana walked into the studio, she was pregnant at the time, and she was horrified that Marvin was smoking a reefer. And the producer tried to get Marvin to put his reefer out, and there was a bit of a confrontation about that. And at some point, he did actually put the reefer out, but the sessions broke down pretty quickly. And Diana and Marvin ended up having to record their parts completely separately in different studios, and then they were both edited into the mix. So it's quite funny because they're kind of, you know, presented on the cover as this very lovey-dovey kind of double act, whereas in fact that's not really how it transpired. Right, so the next one. Now, I don't have a great deal of information about this record. It's an absolute, it's a kind of classic cult record. And I honestly don't know the background to it. If anybody has any background, they can tell me. But this is the Nancy and Lee record. So we've got Nancy Sinatra and Lee Hazelwood. And this record came out, when did this one come out? I don't have a date for it. Back in the 60s. This is a mono copy. And it is on Reprise, 1966, so the year of Revolver, you know. And this album gets better as it goes along. It starts out as being this slightly, almost sort of mainstream pop record, except you've got Lee Hazelwood's voice, which is just, it's kind of indescribable really. He sounds almost sinister. He's got this kind of croaky voice. Nancy sings on it in a very down-to-earth, really, you know, she doesn't emote. It's almost conversational. It's really interesting the way that they sing back and forth to each other on the record, like a kind of ongoing conversation. But as the album goes on, it becomes increasingly psychedelic. So on side 2, you've got tracks such as Some Velvet Morning, which is basically a psych song, and the song Ladybird as well. It all gets a bit kind of harpsichordy and bells ringing, and I don't know, it's just a gradual atmosphere of I suppose what you might describe as mild psychedelia starts to unfold as the record goes on. And it's one of those records that you shouldn't judge it by the first few songs, because it starts off with You've Lost That Loving Feeling, which obviously is a cover, and it's not a bad version, but like I said, it starts out more kind of mainstream pop and becomes increasingly psychedelic, it increasingly sounds like a great lost kind of cult album. And there's a bit of early rock and roll on there as well. It sort of reminds me of, you know, that kind of thing where you're listening to old, you know, rock and roll singles on a transistor radio back in the 60s while out on the open road somewhere. Really, really kind of interesting. Already kind of milking a nostalgic sound, you know, by 1966, kind of, you know, looking back into the history of kind of early rock and roll music and pop music. It was probably kitsch almost immediately after it came out. But yeah, certainly a great record. A couple of country singers now. We've got Loretta, Lynn and Conway, Twitty. And this is their album We Only Make Believe, and I think this was the first record they made. They made quite a few records, maybe 10 albums together, something like that. They were already pretty big together, but they became an absolute sensation when they got together. And this is a really, really nice album. You know, as country music goes, it's not slushy, it's not sentimental. It's just got some quite kind of pared back arrangements on it. It's Only Make Believe, I think, was the big hit off this record, and there's a few other good tracks on here. Picking Wild Mountain Berries at the start of side 1 is a really nice song, and the song Take Me is really beautiful. So I don't have their other records, and I never see them around, but this is one that jumped out at me back in the midst of time, MCA. So yeah, Conway, Twitty and Loretta Lynn, fantastic. Just a couple more. So again, another absolute soul classic now. We have Otis and Carla, and this is some kind of original Stax pressing, a very early one. I do have a repress of this as well as part of an Otis Redding box set, which Dean, Grandma's Handbag, was kind enough to send me. This is the original version I've got, which is it's pretty beat up actually, but I thought I would show this one rather than having to go into the box. So yeah, this is Otis and Carla. What more do I need to say really, other than it's a fantastic soul album. I was reading about this. Apparently Carla Thomas was doing an MA in English when this album was recorded, so I thought it was quite funny. It's got Tramp on it, which is a great R&B song. A cover of Knock on Wood by Steve Cropper and Eddie Floyd. It was done by Eddie Floyd originally, obviously. And I think this was an attempt basically to imitate the success that Marvin had you know, with his duet albums with various people. So there we go, Otis and Carla. And so speaking of Marvin Gaye, here we have, this is possibly the best of the bunch actually. This is the album Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell Greatest Hits. I mean, it's a greatest hits record, but there's so many good tracks on this record. It really is fantastic. So you've got the Onion song, and California Soul, which is one of my Desert Island discs. It's just, you know, it's wonderful, evocative soul music, and they both turn in such great performances. And I've got to say, you know, even though I did enjoy the album that he did with Diana Ross, I think Tammy Terrell was a finer singer. I mean, Diana Ross had a very conversational, unadorned kind of style, really. She was the girl next door, and she did that really well, and she was a pop singer, and she was hugely successful, and she was great in a way, you know. But I think Tammy Terrell has got a more kind of earthy quality. And of course Marvin did some other duets, albums as well. He sang with Kim Weston, he sang with Mary Wells as well, so he did a lot of different collaborations. But for my money, this is his best work that he did, you know, in the duet form, was with Tammy. And of course it had a tragic end. Tammy Terrell died of a brain tumour, and when she was first diagnosed with it, she actually collapsed on stage in Marvin's arms. You know, an amazing story. And yeah, he was absolutely heartbroken. And I think he always swore after that he would never do another duet album, and he had to be really persuaded to do the Diana Ross one. There we go. Gimme 10 male-female duo albums. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Bye bye.